This is an open message to the Occupy Wall Street movement, to the 99%. Revolutions are dangerous and unpredictable beasts, and for a population to enter into one without fully understanding what's at stake is a lot like handing a loaded .45 automatic to a toddler. On the other hand, all it takes is a cursory look at the psychopathic criminals which have taken control of the governments of the world to understand why a revolution is inevitable. This is why it's so important that people who are pushing for change take the time and the effort to deeply consider how we got into this mess and what the real solution is. Otherwise, this movement, like so many others which have come before, will be co-opted, twisted, and distorted, and could result in even more power being handed to those who you're trying to fight. Now, you have every reason to be angry. You, your children, and your children's children have been sold into slavery. Literally. If you're lucky enough to have a job in the years to come, you'll end up paying between 25 and 30% of your income in taxes, the majority of which will go directly towards paying interest on debts to privately owned banks. Think about that. 25 to 30%. That means you work between 3 and 4 months each year for the bankers. That's slavery, pure and simple. It's a cleverly disguised form of modern feudalism. And it's not new. It didn't start with the bailouts. The bailouts were just icing on the cake. It was just a little bit too much for most people to swallow. But in reality, the events of the last several years are just an escalation of standard policy. If you truly want to break free from slavery, it's crucial to understand the nature of your enslavement. It's crucial that the masses come to realize that all major currencies, the dollar and the euro in particular, are created out of thin air by privately owned banks. Those banks create money backed by nothing. Then they loan that money out to governments in exchange for bonds, which are really just promises that the government will extract that money plus interest from the public. That money is extracted from the people in the form of taxes, and those taxes are taken at gunpoint. Sure, you may not have ever seen the gun in your face, but if you ever refuse to comply, men with guns will show up at your house and drag you off to rot in a cage. Perhaps some people don't want to look at this reality. It's not a flattering image. You don't want to think of yourself as a slave to the 1%, to the private bankers which hold the reins of power. But positive thinking is not going to change things for the better. People who want to fight for real change must take the time to research the true nature of money. Only with that understanding will we be in a position to push for meaningful reforms. The solution is not equitable taxation. Calling for equitable taxation is like calling for equitable slavery. And if you waste your energy trying to establish an equal level of tax slavery for everyone, then you're going to miss the opportunity to end the enslavement itself. It is utterly immoral to use violence or the threat of violence to take the property or the labor of another person. But perhaps you've been taught otherwise. Perhaps you've been taught that it's okay for the state to use violence to steal from the public. Perhaps you believe that such violence is okay if it's being done for a quote-unquote good cause. I hate to break the bad news, but the ends do not justify the means. And if you're honest with yourself, you'll have to admit that the ends don't ever seem to quite materialize as promised, do they? In the end, you're given a few half-assed services and social programs, but the vast majority of your money goes straight into the pockets of the bankers and the war profiteers. And it always will, if you keep turning to government thugs to enforce your good intentions. You might think that you can change this by creating new laws and regulations, but the fatal flaw in that line of reasoning is the simple fact that if private bankers are allowed to continue creating money, the financial powers that be will always end up using the government like a sock puppet. And those new regulations, as well-intentioned as they may be, will only end up consolidating their power. Right now, there are those in positions of influence which are attempting to redirect and co-opt the Occupy Wall Street movement. A good example of this is the Vatican, which this past week took it upon themselves to propose the establishment of a new global central bank as a solution to these problems. This is the kind of ridiculous proposition that you're going to find being injected into the debate. Those who are in power will do almost anything to stay in power. And the easiest way to do that is to influence the direction of the movement and the solutions which are demanded. Those who created the problem, the real powers that be, don't mind when you react, just as long as they are able to direct that reaction towards artificial solutions which funnel more power into their hands. Problem, reaction, solution. The Hegelian dialectic. It's the oldest trick in the book. Don't fall for it.
You are listening to The Election Fallout on OppositionRadio.com.
And welcome to episode 33 of Election Fallout on oppositionradio.com. My name is Tony Lothan, and I'm joined, as always, by Mike Cook from Aurelia, Ontario, amongst other places. How you doing, Mike?
Oh, I'm doing okay. Another day in Harperland, another day living in Stephen Harper's Canada with all of his Conservative Reform Alliance party crap. So,
yeah. Well, have you been availing yourself of the Olympics as a means of distraction?
I tried not to. I was wondering if we were going to get to talk about the Olympics again tonight, though.
I think we may. But I don't want to do it right now. We have an Olympic correspondent, as you know, Danny Lage, who might be coming on later on to discuss with us. Nice. I don't know if I want to talk to him. I just got a little bit of a rundown from him earlier. He's literally spitting mad about what's happened to Canada's women on the soccer pitch.
All I've heard is that people are angry.
Yeah. Nobody is quite as angry as Danny Lage.
Okay.
So perhaps if his temper enables him to come on and talk to us in a reasonable manner about Canada's disappointment and perhaps the injustice we've endured, then we'll get him on later.
Well, I was going to say it in relation to living in Stephen Harper's Canada, but the old saying, I guess it works here too. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So,
yeah, there you go.
We got another Olympics in another 2 years?
Yeah,
they do them every 2 years or something.
Yeah, there'll be more Olympics that we can try to win gold.
Sure.
On the soccer pitch. Hopefully, get some decent officiating.
Yeah, that's all I heard is that it was a bad call and that everybody's upset. So yeah. I don't know anything else. So maybe you can inform us.
My net level of knowledge is kind of lacking as well. But that's why we have an Olympic correspondent.
Excellent. I'd love to talk to Danny. It's always fun to talk to.
Yeah, so we'll get him on later. So what's been going on in Canada other than the Olympics?
Well, I think something that's really important to talk about that doesn't seem to get very much coverage anymore in the mainstream media, or even that much coverage in the independent media, is the robocall scandal. This is something that is absolutely huge, and to see it fall out of the news the way it has is kind of a little bit disturbing. So I was glad to hear that the Council of Canadians, their lawyer, Stephen Schreibman, I believe is his name, has filed a request with Elections Canada to provide more details of its ongoing investigation of the robocall scandal, because, as you know, since March, I think it was, when Mayrand, the head of Elections Canada, was in front of the parliamentary committee, Elections Canada has been pretty quiet. You can kind of hear the crickets.
The last thing I heard about Elections Canada was that people were thinking they were sabotaging the case at the Supreme Court, right? That had overturned the Conservative victory in Etobicoke. And then before that, the only thing I heard was that Stephen Harper's loyal appointee, quote, resigned, unquote, and was replaced by a perhaps even more loyal appointee. And then all of a sudden, all this investigation stuff goes quiet. And now, thank goodness for the Council of Canadians who are going after this and making sure, hey, is there something happening here? And then the time before that, what I heard about Elections Canada was that Harper cut their budget.
Yeah, it's kind of, he's using strong arm, Vladimir Putin approach to any of his opponents.
Yeah. If you're ever going to cut the budget for Elections Canada, may as well be when there's 800 complaints in 200 ridings pertaining to voter tampering in an election that you just won, and all that voter tampering just seems to have benefited you. That's not a bad time to cut their budget, replace the person that leads the investigations.
And of course too, we still haven't heard from the person who left, and I'm pretty sure that Canada needs to keep pressing to get an answer and find out why he decided in the middle of this investigation to leave his job. We still don't have an answer on that. I remember the media, all they said was, he didn't leave because the Conservatives forced him out. instead of questioning why he might have left. They
Yeah,
just
why
knew
don't-
that it
yeah.
wasn't that.
Yeah, who said that?
You know?
Now, what? Like, I remember that the CBC said that too. Like, really pacified us. You know, my curiosity levels just went back down to nothing as soon as the CBC soothed me with such information. But one thing that occurs to me this far after the fact is I really don't know what basis that CBC had to say that on. You know,
No, neither do I.
Yeah, why did they say that? Did the old chief of Elections Canada tell them on the way out? Oh yeah, don't worry, I'm resigning, but it has nothing to do with the fact that I don't want to, you know, sweep this whole robocall thing under the rug.
Yeah, this isn't
You know what I mean?
political.
You know, what and
Well-
what did where did the CBC get their info? Like, I just don't get it. Like, I really don't like. You know, we're pundits. We analyze the news and current events. But the CBC, this is a journalistic type organization, so they should have some sort of responsibility to the information that they present. And if they can't reveal a source, at least they have to specifically say, due to unnamed sources close to the situation. They didn't do anything of the sort. They
No,
just
that
they
should
just
have been a
they
huge story
stated-
in itself.
They stated it as a fact with no, you know, with no anything to
No,
substantiate.
they didn't tell us even the source. They didn't say whether he had said that, whether they had talked to conservatives and asked them if there was any
Yeah.
influence. They just bluntly stated
Stated it as a
they're-
fact that doesn't need to be substantiated or supported in any way.
Exactly. So it is a good thing that the Council of Canadians are now asking for full disclosure, and they want Elections Canada to provide them with documents and statistics that it's going to possibly and hopefully show the extent that these pre-recorded and live calls were used to suppress the votes by the Conservatives. One of the interesting things, and we've kind of touched on it already here, first I'll point out that one of the curious things is that Elections Canada is named as a respondent in this case, but at the time when Mark Mayrand was in front of the parliamentary committee, he did say that he would be an amicus curiae, I believe is the term, which is essentially a friend to the court, meaning that he was, even if he's being brought in as a witness or a respondent in this case, that his job is still to provide the court with the information that Elections Canada has.